Welcome back to the Inside the Industry podcast, Season 4, Episode 1, your ultimate guide to the inner workings of the pharmaceutical industry. Get ready for exclusive interviews, insider tips, and expert analyses from the leading minds shaping the industry. We're here to answer your questions, so don't hesitate to comment below or reach out to our social media accounts. Get ready to dive into the fascinating world of pharmaceuticals. So let's begin, y'all.
Welcome back to the Insight to Industry. My name is Ravi, and I'm a second-year pharmacy student at the UNC Eshelman School of Pharmacy. Today, I'm joined with Dr. Peter Kokkinias, who is a medical safety fellow with the FDA through Purdue. Dr. Kokkinias graduated from Purdue with his PharmD and MBA in 2021, and then began his postdoctoral fellowship following graduation. So thank you for joining us today on the podcast. I have just a couple questions just to go through. So our first one, could you tell me a little bit about your journey in the pharmaceutical industry and why you chose industry as a career in pharmacy school?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I had to ask for myself throughout pharmacy school. The first question was, do I need patient interaction to feel like I'm making a difference in my professional career? I worked at CVS as a pharmacy intern and worked in some hospitals and stuff too, and realized pretty soon that I love working with patients, but I didn't need that to feel fulfilled in my career. So once I figured that out, the next pass was asking about industry. And so in doing so at Purdue, they had a class with industry electives that's no longer offered, walking through the different type of functional areas. I started asking questions and doing networking interviews with industry professionals that were recent grads from my College of Pharmacy and other connections that I had. And then those connections proved to be fruitful in me trying to kind of get experience and get my foot in the door into the industry. I have no kind of prior industry internships before I applied for my fellowship. I did get an FDA rotation my P4 year during my EPPEs, and I worked in the central triage unit in medication safety, and that was a great experience to see what safety was really about. And then additionally into that, in my hospital rotations, I was able to have an impact from a medication safety perspective that I was able to carry into my fellowship.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a common thing I've seen with a lot of pharmacy students, especially in my class, is that they come into pharmacy school with the expectation of, do I want to do clinical? How do I immerse myself in that experience to see if, patient care interaction is something pertinent to my career? And I guess going off of that, how did you navigate pharmacy school through organizations and faculty to kind of cater, your experiences to industry? Necessarily, what did you do in pharmacy school to put yourself ahead of others as an industry student, IPHO, externships, things like that?
Yeah, so I was super involved in a professional pharmacy fraternity, Phi Delta Chi, on my campus, and took on small L. And there's different types of leadership that I think are interesting. It's like there's a book that actually talks about little L leaders and big L leaders. So big L leaders are the people with the positions, that the titles of vice president and president of organizations. And so what I did is I made sure to take initiative on things that I was passionate about and ran them from start to finish. So, for example, I saw that there was a need in my community for a health fair. And I ran a health fair from start to finish with congruence with my fraternity that helped fund it, along with the American Red Cross. And I started a health fair from start to finish while I was in pharmacy school. I also took on leadership positions within my fraternity that offered me to be able to speak to my leadership skills in interview settings. And I think what's important for students to realize is it's not a one size fits all with having to be president, having to be vice president. If you don't have those titles, you're not going to get a fellowship. It's about showing your leadership and your drive that you're willing to kind of go from step one to the final and be able to speak to that in your skills.
And would you say, going off of that your organization involvement didn't necessarily have to be industry oriented? It could be anything that you're passionate about and you just gave it your 100%.
That's correct. And I was involved though too in IPHO's VIP case competition to help speak to some of the industry skills and learning about the fields. But I think for most fellowships, they understand that as students, it's really difficult to get those experiences. in those functional areas. And if you can speak to things that you're passionate about, that you follow through with, speaks volumes about the character of the students that we're looking to take on.
I also saw that you completed your MBA while in pharmacy school. What made you, add that onto your curriculum, and how do you utilize that, as a day-to-day kind of thing in a fellowship or in industry, or when you're on your P4 appies? How did you see that utilized from other pharmacists?
Yeah, so believe it or not, I actually received my MBA actually recently. I did that actually part as my fellowship. So I did a 2-year fellowship, obviously Purdue FDA. I just completed my MBA about a month ago officially, and I walked across the stage. And so with that MBA, I'm planning on using it to leverage my experiences later on in the industry. So if I wanted to become a director, a vice president, president, I will be able to kind of balance a budget and help with payroll, because that comes into factors of when you're a leader in the industry, you'll have to kind of deal with money in some respects, regardless of the position that you're in.
Awesome, thank you. And going off of that, could you describe your day-to-day as a medical safety fellow? Like, what does that career entail? What of that career do you enjoy? And do you see yourself going forward with that post your fellowship?
Yeah, so the best part about being a medication safety fellow is the day-to-day kind of changes. And so depending on your location. So when I was at AbbVie, the type of safety work I was doing is different than what I'm doing here at the agency of where I currently work. But in general, for being a safety fellow, you're kind of like what I like to think of in the movie Sherlock Holmes, where you're looking at cases and you're looking for clinical significance. So safety, I would say, is the most clinically oriented aspect of industry, besides being in medical affairs. So it's probably like the first most, but you don't have to deal with patients, and you interact with other physicians, you interact with nurse practitioners on the clinical kind of significance of some of these cases that come through. And you try to assess something called causality with did a drug that a patient took attribute to the adverse event that they experienced? And you kind of use your kind of deduction skills and Sherlock Holmes skills to kind of assess cases for their clinical significance and how it impacts the safety profile of a drug.
Awesome, thank you. And then with respect to applying for that fellowship, how did that change from applying for internships during your PharmD school to then taking the next step to applying to these fellowships? And what challenges did that bring?
Yes. So the biggest challenge that you're going to probably face going through applying for fellowships is the balance of your P4 APPEs, your in rotations from 7 a.m. to 3, 8 a.m. to 4, and you're going to be working so much. You're going to be having projects to take home. You're going to come back and you're going to continue to work on other things. So you're going to work on your rotational work. You're going to work on your fellowship work, but you're also going to reach out to people and set up calls. And I think it's really important to network. I went overboard, and I would kind of, or like, I'm very extroverted, so it's easier for me to have these conversations, but limit your calls to about like maybe once a week with an industry professional in the area that you're interested in, specifically the fellows that are in those programs, to speak to them and how they enjoy the process. But also it's important to have a network outside of fellowships, where these are industry professionals that can review your CV, can review your letter of intent. So when you're applying for these programs, you've had multiple eyes look through them, so to make sure that there's no grammatical errors, and also to kind of double check that you're sending it to the correct sponsor. Because I've seen so many applications where a student will send me the application and it's to the wrong. They meant to, like, it's for Purdue AbbVie, and they sent it to, like, it was another company, and that's an immediate, we're not going to look at you anymore, and you've kind of like you're not going to be kind of going farther in the application process.
Oh, wow. With going forward with that, um, how does that change with like internships? So when you're in pharmacy school,
Yeah.
how necessary is it for students to, get themselves immersed in an industry internship, such as like, interning at AbbVie or Abbott or GSK, for a summer? How necessary is that on the application?
Yeah, it's a nice to have, it's not a need to have. And so that's the important thing too, is a lot of these internships, again, are super, super competitive. And it comes down to kind of sometimes who you know as well. So being cognizant of that, I applied, in full transparency, probably 150 internships between my P1, P2, and P3 combined. And I didn't get a single one. And here I am right now today speaking on this podcast. So it's not a death sentence if you don't get one, and it doesn't speak to your character as a student if you can't get one.
So going off then the networking, what are some tips and tricks you'd give to, new and upcoming pharmacy students or even pre-pharm students that have considered maybe industry as a career? And, for myself, I had always considered myself a career in clinical. I had done everything to cater my application to pharmacy school that, oh, I'm going to be a clinical pharmacist. I'm going to go work on the floor. And then I realized that that wasn't necessarily for me. And there's a lot of things I need to navigate and, many other students. How would you, or what tips and tricks would you give for students that may not know where to start?
Yeah. So to start, I think the website LinkedIn is going to be your biggest and best friend. LinkedIn message and having a short, kind of succinct message about, hi, blah blah blah. My name is blank. I'm a P4 student. I'm a P3 student at blah 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 school. And just saying, hey, I'd love to connect. And through LinkedIn message, send them. It's like you can also send them a LinkedIn invite and then attach that with a message to connect. And then once you're in those conversations, this is probably one of the biggest things I tell most students is try to end most conversations with industry professionals with, what, who do you think I should talk to, who I should connect with? And but when you're talking with these individuals, realize that they're also people too. And so they could be a director, CEO, vice president, but they're just somebody's mom, someone's dad. And so going in with that mindset that they're human just like you with 20, 30 years more experience helps lower the gradient of the conversation and making it more free flowing because it's supposed to be a conversation and more kind of free flowing with getting to know them and they get to know you.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. And I guess going off of that, after your fellowship, what are your plans or what are your goals with your career or your interests? Would you be staying with the FDA through that fellowship, or would you consider other pharmaceutical companies to maybe go and work for?
Yeah, so right now I'm currently applying for positions. I'm looking the FDA. I could potentially work back here. I do love it here, and so I'm debating if I want to stay at the FDA or if I want to move to an industry company like AbbVie. My ideal, I think, right now would be with AbbVie, but obviously I'm open to other kind of positions, specifically in safety and the work I've spent 2 years dedicated to, and that's kind of where I'm looking to stay at least for now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Any other just general advice for students, current pharmacy students, in general, maybe with the curriculum, navigating, orgs or, IPPs, APPs, things like that you'd give?
Yeah. So I'm a boatload of information. And to start, I would say when you're going through the application process, this is geared towards P3s, going to be P4s. And going through the application process, self-care is going to be super, super important over that time, and having a network of friends and family to turn to going through the process. There are going to be times where, again, you're super stressed, you're balancing everything, your time is limited, and your time for self-care can be crunched, but it's important to not lose that and also kind of stay geared towards what you're passionate about. Secondly, for people going through APPs and IPPs, make sure to make the most of those experiences. And the big word that you're going to use in interviews and throughout your process is the word leverage. So you're going to leverage your experiences and cater them to the fellowships that you want. And you can make any rotation industry related by your drive and your passion with conflict, helping a patient, making an intervention from a clinical perspective, to speak to your qualities as a detail-oriented and driven pharmacist.
Definitely. And for, this is not necessarily the case for you, but for a P3 or P4, P4 specifically, they've gone through all the apps. They don't land a fellowship. I know they're very, very competitive. What career alternatives are there for them, for someone that is really invested in industry?
Yes. So that is when you kind of turn to your network and reach out for direct to end industry jobs. They're kind of harder to come by with kind of no experience because most of them want like 5 to 6 years of experience. But also there are clinical research organizations, CROs. Those example would be like ClinPlace in Cincinnati, Ohio, and others. I have a couple friends that worked at ClinPace after they did not land a fellowship, and they worked at ClinPace. Now, one of them is a medical science liaison for Eli Lilly in Iowa. And
Oh,
so
nice.
yeah, and so there are success stories. I know many people that have gone down that path. But it's also need to be vigilant as well of like the content you're signing with some of these CROs, because I know some of them are not the most forthright in how the contracts are set up.
No, definitely. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's all I have right now. I appreciate the advice. I'm sure our listeners will benefit from it. And I appreciated your perspective as well. And I appreciate for you taking time out of your busy day. I know you're busy, for making time for us and being a guest on the podcast. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Over 80% of you guys do not subscribe, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button and be sure to check out our vibrant Instagram page. Join our community and help us grow by sharing your content with others who would find it valuable. Let's build a community of industry enthusiasts together.